Well, hello everyone and welcome to another Oh Yum live stream. It's my pleasure to be here with you. We've got my darling husband Michael running the cameras. He's very excited because we have a new lens today. This is very exciting. It's also exciting because yay, this is my season. It's our baking season. We're gearing up to the holidays and I'm so thrilled you could join me today, whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. I want to say a big hello to those of you who are such loyal bakers and viewers. And of course, hello to my mom and dad, Kathy and Craig. I see you're watching. Raf, you're joining us. Bonnie down the street. Suzanne maybe is joining us. And so it is just my pleasure to be here and share a recipe for holiday Stollen. Now, this is a brand new recipe. You won't find a Stollen recipe on my YouTube channel in any other form. This is the first time I'm making it for you. It is a very well-tested recipe. I've been making this for a few years, and I would like to say a big thank you to Rolling Meadow Dairy for sponsoring this live stream, because when you have delicious ingredients, it just makes everything better. Now, if you don't know what a Stollen is, I don't want to compare it to a fruitcake. It contains many fruits and nuts, like a fruitcake, but it is a bread as opposed to a cake. But like a fruitcake, it does stay fresh and moist. And I like to make a Stollen that is kind of light and airy, not too dense and heavy. So let's get right to it to make a really good bread dough. This is a soft bread dough that is going to hold in such a mass of fruit and nuts. It starts with a sponge starter. So the first thing I want to do is heat up my milk. I'm using 2% milk. You can use whole milk if you wish. And I'm measuring 250 ml. And I'm going to put that into a pot and just warm it up just to above body temperature. Now for this recipe, and you'll see the complete recipe below here on the screen, I call for using bread flour. And quite often, wherever possible, I try and use just regular all-purpose. In the UK, that would be plain flour, just sort of a mid-level flour when I'm making bread. I am specific about bread flour, so this is a harder wheat, sometimes called hard flour or strong flour. It's got a higher protein content, and that's because we put so much fruit and nuts in here that can almost interrupt the protein development. So you need the stronger, the higher protein flour in order to get the bread to hold itself together. Oh, Queenie, good question. The difference between full milk and 2%, your milk percentages or names might have different titles in different countries. Here in Canada, 2% might be called partly skimmed or semi-skimmed milk, where whole milk or full milk is 3.25%, sometimes even a little bit higher. Then you've got your lower fat milk that can be around 1%, and then skim milk, which has virtually zero fat. But here we want some fat, so either the 2 to 3.5% to make the dough nice and soft and give it a richness. I'm stirring in all of the yeast that I need. And I should point out, this doesn't make one loaf of the holiday Stollen. This makes 3, even 4 if you're doing smaller. Because if you're going to go through this effort, you might as well make a few, because they do keep well and you can wrap and even freeze them if you want. So now I'm just stirring my instant yeast into the flour. This is instant. If you've got regular yeast, then what you'll want to do is pop it into your slightly warmed milk. Yep, just above body temperature. And let it dissolve for a minute. I'm gonna set that off to the side because I'm going to need that pot again. And now just with a spoon, you can do this in the big mixing bowl that you plan on making your Stollen in if you want. But that quantity of flour to liquid makes more of a paste here. And so There it is. It's kind of wet and sloppy. Can we get a close-up of this, Michael? Just so there's nothing really you're looking for that's special, and even a few lumps is all right. Eric, hello. Writing us from Argentina and all the way from Harvey in Niagara. We're neighbors practically. Esther is asking, can you make this gluten-free? It would take playing with the recipe. I think you could if you have a really good gluten-free baking blend that you have good success with. What I find now, I've been playing with some new ones recently that are just so much better than baking blends were even 3 to 5 years ago. So I say it's worth giving it a try. And you still want to go through the fermentation, even though obviously you don't have to knead the dough as much when you're working it and combining it. So very good question. Hello, everyone. It's great to see where you're joining us from Missouri and Lethbridge, Alberta, and all the way from New Zealand too. So now, at this point, this is the first step of your Stollen. The day you wish to make it, this you set aside and leave it uncovered and just let it sit for half an hour. That way the yeast comes to life and you'll find it gets a little activity to it, and I'll just set that behind here. Now, let's talk about the fruits. Now, this is a step that I like to do a day ahead if you can, because we're going to steep the fruits. We're going to hydrate them so that way they have less of a tendency to burn when you bake your Stollen, but they plump up so wonderfully and really then just are like little gems inside the Stollen when you slice it. So I'm starting here with, I've already measured my raisins. I'm using Thompson raisins. I find they're really, really plump. Of course, you may have different types available. Sultanas work just fine. If you prefer a smaller fruit, to use currants in place of the raisins is absolutely fine. I have dried cranberries here, and to match the size of the raisins, I've actually chopped the cranberries up a little bit. So that way within the Stollen, you don't have big pieces and little pieces. Everything is about the same size. That gets added in. I've got my sliced almonds. These are unblanched, they're blanched and sliced but untoasted. You can use slivered if you want. If you have a nut allergy, well then omit obviously the almonds, but you could use pumpkin seeds or sunflower seeds if you want. And at holiday time, I love using candied orange peel. And now you can buy candied peel. You can buy lemon, citron, orange, or mixed. It depends where you are and what you have available. I'll be honest, I do prefer making my own. So let me give you just a little quick rundown on making candied orange peel. It's amazing how much candied peel you can get from just 3 navel oranges. And what you want to do is actually score, I'll show you here, you score your orange around the top and around the bottom, and then you make a couple of cuts, kind of from, you know, if this was the North Pole, hi Santa, and the South Pole, you make cuts along this way, and then without breaking through the flesh of the orange, you peel those segments. So you get nice little squares that are easy to cut into strips. And then from that point, what you want to do to really get a nice candied peel is you need to draw out some of the bitterness. So bring a pot of just plain water up to a boil, drop in the peel, let it boil for 1 minute, drain it, and that pulls out a lot of excess bitterness. Then you throw that water away, start with fresh water and make a simple syrup. So equal parts sugar to water, bring that up to a boil, add your peel, and then turn down the heat and you simmer that peel for about 15 minutes. Take it off the heat and leave it in that syrup, and you'll watch your candied peel go translucent and clear, and then pack it in the syrup in the fridge, and it will keep for weeks and weeks and weeks, dare I say months and months. But I do a batch around this time of year, and that way I have it for the entire holiday baking season. So I've diced up my candied peel. I find making it homemade, it's a little more tender too than if you had store-bought. And for spices, I have a delicious combination of mostly, you'll see it's a teaspoon of ground cardamom, half a teaspoon of cinnamon, and then a 1/4 teaspoon of allspice and clove. And then I'll also grate in a little bit of nutmeg at the same time. And this is where, even without adding any heat, it starts smelling so good. There we go. Now I'm adding my half a cup or 125 ml of rum to the recipe. You could use brandy if you wanted to. And if you wanted to leave the spirits out of it, use something like orange juice or apple cider to hydrate the fruits. I'll give this a quick little stir. Wow, we've got Natalie watching from Trinidad. Jamie is writing to us again from Lethbridge. And Aunt Dini is asking, can you do that with lemons? 100%. To do candied lemon peel is exactly the same method. It's really doesn't take a lot of time, and it makes such a difference in the end result of your baked goods. And especially because I know some people sit on the fence when it comes to desserts and breads and cakes that are heavily laden with dried fruits and nuts. Dare I say fruitcake. Now, I will ask you, are you fruitcake fans or are you anti-fruitcake? I have to say, I like fruitcake, but I am very particular on what type of fruitcake I like to make. Oh, Maxine, Michael's sister Maxine is joining us, and her grandchildren, Emma and Avery. Hello to you. Thank you for joining us and watching. I know you were making wienertorte last week, and for those who don't know wienertorte, that is almost like the Icelandic version of fruitcake. It's a cardamom spiced shortbread layered with a prune filling, many layers, and it takes a long time to bake, and it is good. And Michael is giving me the heart emoji love signals because that is his favorite dessert at Christmas time. Okay, once you've stirred your fruit together, you want to cover the bowl, and if you can, let this set for 24 hours. If you forgot to do this a day ahead, in a microwave safe bowl, you could pop this in the microwave for a minute or two, and that will actually cause the dried fruits and nuts to absorb the liquid, and then the heat will get the spice flavor into this mixture. So now I'm going to set this aside and we can go back to making the dough. I am going to take up every bit of counter space today. Now I have my starter. This is the starter that I made right before. I made it about 15-20 minutes before we started the live stream, and look at how it has come up. So all that yeast has really come to life. So we're going to add that to our mixing bowl. I've already measured my bread flour into it. Oh, and Tammy's saying that she likes fruitcake, and do I have a recipe? I do. I believe you will find a fruitcake recipe on this channel, and it is more of a lighter style fruitcake. So a lighter cake batter. And I like to use, just like my Stollen, I tend to use dried fruits as opposed to too many candied fruits. I'm not a big fan of the green candied cherries. Just saying. So the starter goes into the bowl with the flour. I need to heat up just a little more milk again. This time just half a cup to level out my batter. So back in the pot. And I'm adding 1 egg and 2 egg yolks to the dough. So it really, you can tell it's going to be a lovely, rich dough. And it is on the sweeter side compared to bread doughs. You think even a cinnamon bun dough, the dough itself isn't sweet, but you add sugar. But we are actually adding half a cup of sugar to this dough to give it a nice sweetness. We'll balance that out with a bit of salt. And at the same time, while the milk is heating, I'll add some orange zest. If you prefer, Tammy, you had asked, no, it was Aunt Deanie asked about doing candied lemon peel. You could add lemon zest in place of orange. There's something for me about that combination of spices and orange at the holiday season that is a natural. So that we've got the zest going into the dough, the candied peel. And the last thing I need before I start the mixer is to get my butter ready. And so I need 175 grams of butter. And you want your butter to be at room temperature. This time of year, I don't know about you, if you're doing a lot of holiday baking, well, I just keep a couple packages of butter out on the counter. And make sure that's the right amount. And then my remaining butter I will use for the glaze. There are a few steps involved when it comes to making Stollen. So having your ingredients ready before you start can count, but you've got little bits of time. You will be surprised that unlike some bread dough recipes, Stollen doesn't take all day to rise and then bake. It really only takes about 2.5 hours of the mixing process in advance of baking and about 50 to 60 minutes to bake. So as my mixer starts, I'll add in the butter, a few pieces at a time. Oh, and I immediately can smell the orange zest that's in there. But because I made my milk, thank you. Michael was just pointing to the milk. Thank you. If it's not in front of me, I swear, I'll forget it. There, that will help the moisture balance it out. Ooh, Jersey saying, cardamom orange shortbread. I love that idea. So just take your favorite shortbread recipe, add a little orange zest and a little ground cardamom. And what the cardamom does in combination with the orange zest in this recipe, I think is absolutely fantastic too. And it's not typical. We're not going for a gingerbread style of flavor. It's very elegant and refined. And you'll notice I am not adding the fruits when I'm mixing the dough. I wait, because if we add those moist, plump fruits right now, it's going to interfere with the dough mixing, and you won't get the structure in the development, and you'll end up with a Stollen that bakes up dense and heavy. Doesn't have a lot of volume to it. So we're gonna give this a minute, and how's everyone doing? Oh, Colin says Stollen is really popular here in the Netherlands. Well, it is European, and I was just speaking to someone whose mother is from the Netherlands, and he has such fond childhood memories of her making Stollen. So I definitely believe you that is popular in the Netherlands. Its origins are German, but you see it throughout Europe. And you can even buy them here. We see them in Canada, don't we, Michael? Mm-hmm. Yes, too. And you think of marzipan and northern Germany too. Well, no, southern Germany too, Salzburg. Yeah, we visited Salzburg once, and you could buy that fancy marzipan. Oh, hello, Stardust Unicorn. How are you doing? Thank you for joining us. And from Malaysia, we've got people getting up in Southeast Asia. Thank you for joining us. Oh, and Linda says that her mother used to make it. There's quite often a nice family connection when it comes to some of these treasured recipes. Oh, and from England, Kayla is also saying it. And now, Jamie or Jaime, you made a comment, but it disappeared on the thread, but it was something I was going to acknowledge. And, oh, sorry, I'm just following the thread while my dough's mixing here. Renew, hi! Hi, thank you for joining us. And what can you use instead of eggs? For a recipe like this, Rainu, I wouldn't go for the flax egg, the flax seed, because it would just add not the right texture to it. But I would do silken tofu. Just adding that pure protein will add the moisture, structure without messing with the dough at all. So I think that is a great question to ask. And hello to Indonesia. It's great to see. Hello, Juna. See everyone. Now, my dough is coming along. I just want to give it another minute. You may find it's a bit dense, and it should be. But as that sugar liquefies and softens, as it sits and rises, you'll find the dough softens up. What this does tell you is, because it is not a really wet, sticky dough, if you don't have a mixer, you can bring this dough together by hand quite easily. Try not adding any more than 50 grams of more flour. It can be tempting when you're working a dough by hand to add extra flour just so it doesn't stick to your hands. But what I want to try and have you do is hold back some of the flour from the measurement and then add it if you find you need it. But as you can see, it's not sticking to my hands. So once you work it in a bowl until it comes together, you tip it out onto your work surface and knead it. So this goes back into my bowl. This I would cover, and I would let this rise for an hour on the counter. Not more than that. If you want to buy yourself more time, let it sit out to let the yeast start activating. Anytime you want to slow bread from rising, to buy yourself time, because this is a busy time of year, you have things to do, pop it in the fridge. The minute you pop it in the fridge, that stops the clock on yeast, or it slows it down dramatically, buying you lots of time. Then you pull it out when you're ready to work on it again. Just realize once chilled, your dough needs more time to rise up. Michael, I'm gonna pass that to you, and I'll just take a quick second, if you don't mind, to just get the mixer out of the way, because I'm done with it now. I want a little more space, because now it's time for that next step. So after the hour, when your bread dough has risen, it will look like this. And I'll save that to use it again. And after a day, look at how plumped up these fruits are. So all the liquid is gone, and even the nuts have softened, which really adds, you'll find when you bite into the Stollen, you get the almond flavor, but you're not going to get a crunch from nuts in there. And it's actually quite pleasing because the texture of the baked bread, the plump fruits, and then the softened nuts is really quite nice. So I'm adding all the fruit and nuts. It almost looks like there's as much fruit as there is dough. And I'm gonna just get, instead of making a mess of my workspace, I'm going to stand on my tiptoes and really work in the fruit with my hands. Because now that the dough's had a chance to rise, the proteins in the flour are developed, the bread will hold in the fruits. And you will see the color of the dough change a little bit because the spices will start working into the dough and really get in there and squish it all around. Janice is asking from Nevada, a very good question. Do you have videos about baking at elevation? Well, Janice, you are not alone in that asking that question. I know I've probably got people watching from Calgary, Alberta, which is 1,000 meters above sea level, and baking at altitude has its own set of rules. I don't have a video specifically about that, but I would like to take that to heart because when I went to cooking school, I went to school in Vail, Colorado, which was 8,000 feet above sea level. And so during our baking classes, we learned firsthand about the impacts of baking at high altitude. In a nutshell, I'll just take a quick second to talk about it while I'm working in my fruits. You're dealing with a lower air pressure, so that means less resistance. That means your baking, especially cakes, are most dramatically affected, but breads also. That means with less air resistance in the air, things rise up faster, but because a recipe is designed for sea level, your elements may not set, and so that's why cakes and breads may collapse. So the trick is to lower your leavener. That could be baking powder, baking soda, yeast. Increase your liquids a little bit, so that way your ingredients take more time to come together. And in the initial part of the cooking process, increase your oven temperature a little bit to get everything heated up and cooking. And that's kind of your starting point for baking at altitude. An excellent question. But I know if you're watching from Singapore or Malaysia, you are not at high altitude. You are right by the sea. Oh, Renu, thank you for watching. Wow, and it's 1:30 in the morning. You're either up very early or staying up late. And hello, Gwen from Utica, New York. This is great. Oh, Georgie Pie has a great idea. Is it possible to use a tea like Earl Grey to soften the fruit? 100%. Yes, that would be a delicious option if you wanted to not use spirits. It's not critical, a critical ingredient the way it is in fruitcake to extend the shelf life of this. It's more for flavor. So please, if you don't want to use the rum or brandy, use a juice, or I love that suggestion of the Earl Grey tea. All right, so the fruit is worked in. You can see how, you can tell when you're kind of done because the dough has changed color. It's taken in the spices. This I would cover, and now you just need to let it set for 20 minutes just to kind of get the yeast coming back to life in the bread. So I'll just set this away. I haven't gone away, coming right back. And now we're gonna move into shaping the Stollen. So this is a half recipe. In case you're wondering, the bread dough does not shrink. It does grow, but I wanted to make sure that you saw every step of the recipe. And I also have to balance it with the amount of Stollen I am making. I think I calculated, Michael, by the end of this demonstration in process, I will probably have up to 14 Stollen. So Bonnie, Merry Christmas. Guess what you're getting? Everybody gets a Stollen for Christmas from me. Oh boy. So you can see how now the bread is coming to life, and a nice option to add to your Stollen, and this is traditional, is to have a roll of marzipan enveloped by that dough inside the center of the Stollen. And this adds delicious flavor. It also helps keep the Stollen nice and moist from the center out. And it looks beautiful. You can leave it out if you wish. Now, just like the candied orange peel, I make my own marzipan, and you will find that the recipe for my homemade marzipan is below. And I do believe there is a video of this exact same recipe right here on Oh Yum. So just type in marzipan and you will find that recipe if you need to see a demonstration of it. Once you realize how easy it is to make homemade marzipan compared to the price you pay in the store, or how difficult it can be to find good quality marzipan, you will never go back, because all you do is take ground almonds, put it in a food processor, you heat up sugar, honey, and just a little water. As soon as it comes to a boil, you pour it into the food processor, blitz it, you add almond extract if you wish, but you don't have to. And I find that's the deciding factor is, oh, thank you, Michael. Because some store-bought marzipan can use artificial almond extract, and that's just you go to all this effort and you spend the money to buy the good fruits and nuts, you might as well make the marzipan too. And once you make it, you have it. So I've taken 2 pieces and I'm rolling them. I'm going to show you, I'm going to make 2 smaller loaves of the Stollen here, just so you can really get a handle on the shaping, which is not overly difficult. You'll find the dough is easy to handle. And so I'm rolling this out to about the length of each loaf. I'll take a sip of water at the same time. Oh, Ray's asking a good question. Can you substitute with port, a fortified wine? You certainly could. Sherry would work just as well. So really get creative, customize this recipe, and you see the volume of fruit and nuts. If you want to change those up to different fruits and nuts, maybe include something like prunes or dried apricots or dried cherries, I invite you to do it, because I get satisfaction when I know that you take ownership of one of my recipes and really make it your own and feel good about what you're able to create. So that's a great question to ask. And yes, the kitchen is starting to smell really good with all the spices right now. Okay, now I'm going to flour my work surface. And divide my dough into 2 pieces. Oh, there's my scraper. And you don't need a rolling pin for this activity, but if you find the dough's getting sticky, just a dusting of flour. And you want to loosely shape this into an oval and just flatten it out with your hands. And Deanie, I think you're right. I think it is a very versatile recipe. You've got a lot of room for creativity. And as I said, the recipe itself makes 3 very large loaves, but you could divide this into 4 or even 6 and make smaller ones if you wanted a more modest gift to give to someone. I think I'll do both at the same time. So you want an oval shape, but it's really, this is about 1 centimeter thick. Oh, definitely need a little bit of flour there. No, Juna, if I started singing a Christmas song for you, everybody would sign off, and we don't want that to happen. I may love listening to Christmas carols, but I do not have a singing voice. Michael's chuckling because he knows that's so true. My talents stop at the kitchen. Okay, so now that I've got my 2 oval shapes, I'm going to place a piece of marzipan on each, but off center, not in the center. And then the next step is to fold over and then use the side of your hand to press that dough in place. And then this remaining side that's open, we want to create another fold. So it is true that the marzipan inside the Stollen will not be in the middle. It'll be off to one side. And then you can just tweak the dough a little bit to reshape it to the traditional shape. Now, if you see any large pieces of raisin peeking out, you can just pull them out, because if they're almost out of the bread anyhow, they're going to fall out and they're at risk of burning. But you don't want to be pulling the dried fruits out. So I'll do this again, fold it over, and then take the other side and do the same. And reshape the bread. And that is your traditional Stollen shape. Now, what I like to do is cover my tray with a tea towel, and you let the Stollen rise for 30 minutes. So just to recap the proofing process, your sponge starter proofs for 30 minutes, then the dough proofs for an hour, then after the fruit, it's 20 minutes, and then after that, 30 minutes. But then at that point, it's ready for the oven. So I'll set this aside, and it doesn't look dramatically different from this point to 30 minutes into the oven, so I don't have that stage to show you. But right before we went live, I did pull 2 Stollen from the oven. So these are still warm, and you can see just that beautiful shape they have. Now, there are 2 more steps to the process before we're done, and they're very, very simple. The first is to make a glaze. So when your Stollen are still warm, you want a finishing glaze that is made from heating up water and melting sugar. And then my remaining, I have my 1/4 cup left of my butter here. I'm going to add that to the pot. And that becomes the glaze that sort of half seeps in on the surface of the Stollen, and this kind of seals it in, making sure it stays moist for days. It's that combination of the sugar, but also the butter. And this is the kind of bread where I would be tempted to put a piece of butter, spread a piece of butter on it. So might as well work it in already. Give this a little stir. I just want that to dissolve before I brush it onto the bread. So, oh, I'm glad you like the looks of them, and I really hope you give this recipe a try. The almond is traditional, but like I said, I think you can get creative and add your own flair to it. Joe Awesome, if you're just joining us, we are making a holiday Stollen, a traditional German fruitcake style bread. It's not a cake, it's a bread. And it is delicious when it's well made, which is exactly what we're doing today. Now my butter is almost melted. I've got a brush, and I'm gonna borrow this tea towel that I have. I'm hiding my other Stollen in, because as you're doing this process, you may find the bread is still quite hot. This one, because I've been talking a fair bit, and Michael's chuckling, I'm sure, has cooled down that I can handle it with my bare hands. But if it's just 10 or 15 minutes from the oven, you may find it's warm to the touch. And there is my butter's melted. All right, so with the brush, you want to really saturate this bread. This amount of glaze is just the right amount for the full recipe. So I'm only going to use half because this is the half that I baked right before we went live. And you also want to get the bottom of the bread as well. Do remember, if you're pulling these from the oven, the Stollen will be very fragile when they're hot from the oven. So they settle and are less fragile once they've had a chance to cool, but you do want to make sure they're warm. Oh, Jamie or Jaime, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Could you freeze the dough after the final stage? Do you mean after it? If you mean after it's shaped, but before it goes into the oven, yes, you could. These also freeze really well after baking, so you have both options. And if you want to split this up between 2 days, because if you have other things to do, you could make the dough at any point, as I mentioned. Once you get the initial dough made, before or after you add the fruit, you can pop it in the fridge and then just keep it overnight and work with it the next day. All right, so after you've got the glaze nicely coated, that sort of seals in the moisture and freshness of the bread, you let them cool completely, and then it's time for that final step. You know what this is. The dusting of icing sugar. So this recipe I made yesterday and glazed yesterday, and it's still nice and moist. But you want to give yourself lots of space, and it takes a lot of icing sugar to coat these. So we're not talking a little dusting, but a generous coating. And just like the glaze, top and bottom. And then you can wrap them for gifting. And you want to keep them as airtight as possible. But they will keep for days. Don't forget that marzipan and all that soaked fruit is in there. So I'll flip these over. I do like a recipe like this over the holidays because if you're going to go through the effort of making one, you might as well make more than one, and then you have something delicious like this to share. I think this makes a wonderful homemade gift from the kitchen. And I'll put it back over again. Doesn't that just look fantastic? Well, you know, of course I'm going to cut into one. I've got my cutting board over here. And of course, you see what's behind me. I have starter, I have bread to still go in the oven, I have dough rising over there with fruit, I have the dough that I've made. So when I sign off and say goodbye, my baking does not end here. I will be continuing to bake. All right, and I want to cut right into it. Oh, there it is, that beautiful marzipan center. And because this is a rich bread, you don't need thick pieces, nice slender pieces. Oh, I just think that looks fabulous. And you've got that sweet glaze on the outside. And Mike, you are very kind to offer to be my tester for all of these recipes. I do have an in-house recipe taste tester here. Michael, would you like a slice? There you go.
Wow.
And this would make incredible. Imagine making French toast with this after a while. Just a little light soaking and then toasting up in the pan. Oh, so good. And Deanie, thank you so much. Your questions were amazing, and I hope you'll come and join us for another live stream. And everybody, I have one more holiday baking live stream. It will be right close to Christmas, December 22nd. I will be back here and I am going to be making an unbelievable chiffon cake with a raspberry Swiss meringue buttercream, and we'll make a raspberry wreath on top. So this is that show-stopping dessert that you want to make, and we're gonna master making chiffon cake and Swiss meringue buttercream all at the same time. Thank you to Rolling Meadows Dairy for sponsoring today's live stream. They will also be sponsoring the chiffon cake with the raspberry buttercream. I'm really feeling the holiday vibes. I hope you are too. The kitchen smells amazing. I hope I've given you lots of tips, and I know you can make this recipe. Even if you've never made or even tried Stollen before, I know you've got this. You are such amazing viewers. You're such talented bakers. You're so supportive of me and of each other, and I thank you for that, because that is the spirit of the holiday season. So let's keep baking, and I will see you on December 22nd for another live stream. Cheers, everyone. Oh, it's so moist. Yep, that tastes like the holidays.